Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 5th of January. Relatively benign start to the year here so far for the first few days. Still holding above ABM from a daily standpoint. Pretty clean. A little bit of softness here from the MBI where the magenta potentially could dip below 33. It's just about a little bit over 33.31, so a dip there could be a little weakness. You got the full reset of the MBI white, so that would still take quite a few days for it to transition unless you had a major sudden move. But we've been in a little bit of weakness anyway with DOC cyan above red, but red holding pretty even. I mean, we're just almost near zero, so it's still fairly decent. And we've had very solid weakness from midterm as well as now even a little bit of fade of short-term buyers. So the fact that price hasn't really moved, and most of it you can credit with the top 5 stocks really keeping the indexes relatively high, given the fact that a lot of other stocks individually have really had some significant pullbacks overall. From a Dow standpoint, there you go, pushing up to those new highs and pretty consistent with all of that within its reading, still looking strong. So there's a little divergence there between the Dow, and then from a NASDAQ standpoint, NASDAQ's just a lot weaker. Below its ABM yellow, magenta below yellow, and rising white on the MBI. Those are all weakness signs. So if there's going to be extended weakness, it's going to be the NASDAQ carry through, and with last peak of the white MBI being in the lead, I look for those moves to take you to the 50% level, which still is another couple hundred points lower from that standpoint. So keep that one in mind. The euro, they're just keeping that flat line. No shock with that. And from a gold standpoint, the up and down, again, I still think the bias is overall to the upside, so you're just going to have to be patient with that one. But again, gold isn't exactly one of those that you're expecting to move dramatically very fast anyway. This is the problem here, is you got oil continuing its rise, moving back towards its highs, and that is going to continue the bottleneck inflationary pressures, you name it, all combined. We talked about the 48,000 level, those previous algo level that really psychologically needed to stay above, and has been having trouble for Bitcoin getting back to it. And that, each time here you're making successively lower highs and then making a new low. Those are all very bearish configurations. Still has a chance to pull it around and break above, but in this case you got MBI white leading, so dip back to magenta, and that'll turn around to the downside as well. And from an ETH, Ethereum, beautiful run up, and this was so nice because it started right on positive extremes. So literally marked that and progressed. Started the early beginning of a DOC spread. This is the early spot. The next one is super clean and relatively close, and then boom, it's just takes the initial dip right back to fill. And then even after the fill, you had MBI red leading most of the little pops, so it's just a matter of waiting for decay, clean decay signal. And this is kind of a good setup to see where the magenta presents weakness with the dip down, and you have white sort of leading, but it's still above yellow. And then you have yellow rising within this setup. So even if you were short, though, you're still kind of flat within this, but it's when it breaks down the magenta below the yellow there that you get that clear, and particularly when you do it around that 25 level, tends to give you the nice run to the 0 points, and that's exactly what it did there. A little bit of a turn back. It was good to see that one because it happens a lot, so it's worth noting, because sometimes you get a short signal that comes in and it just doesn't quite do anything. It's just a matter of waiting for that confirmation signal, but the reality is that you could be waiting for that and get a turnaround to the upside for it. So it's not one of those where I typically will wait and just sit short. It's one where I want to wait until I actually get the trigger signal to jump back into it for a confidence standpoint. From a 50K, again, look at how tight this range is getting from a 0 to 100% range. Just not a lot. And the tighter that gets, when it's usually around under 50 is when you really typically going to get that explosive range, and we're getting close to that at this particular point right now. So let's see if that continues. Intraday was beautiful. We started off with positive extremes, marked those, put them on the Skype chat, and then we also had the previous range from before. Popped up beautifully. Magenta led a lot of the way, and then it started breaking down a little bit, and then it was once the white started moving above red at key spots is when I was really looking for it to continue to break down. Whether you started with the first one taking place right over here, or the final right there. To me, it's just one of those where I look for situations where I get up between that 50 and 100% range and look to be able to add in. And even after the little dip to the 50%, the pop back up. Once you get to the peak, the red popped over. To me, that was exciting because I jumped on it actually a little early because of that. That can be problematic. You really want to be below that 33 with magenta and everything else to really get the cascade through, which is why I marked it. But more often than not, when you get that red spike above and an immediate weakness of the magenta, and that usually does give a feed. And I had the 87 as the target there, so it was like a good opportunity. But even in taking it the later, it was still good risk to reward, and continued to fill in a little bit lower. And then going across, we stayed soft through a lot of these setups, but then we started getting series P2 setups. Even this P2 right here, I was a little surprised that when we got up to the peaks that we started to get the weakness that we did, because oftentimes that will start and then you just get the magenta and yellow going all the way across, sort of like the secondary one right over here. So the fact that it dipped back down just meant that it needed to get more power into it, but it still produced a couple of decent short setups within that with the signaling. So you can't complain about that concept. You might see this one marked in the turn red, and the reason being is the pivots below magenta below 25 usually a pretty good triggered automatically from a short, even if red is still leading over white and white hasn't crossed over. At least if there's been a crossover within the last 5 or 6 bars, I don't have a problem with it. If we had been a long stretch without the red cross, then I would wait until you actually get the white moving above the red MBI, just from a safety standpoint. Plus, you're also looking, this was Rising Gold and Rising Azure, which really can catch some solid trend setup to the upside. So, but in this case, pretty clean, and in fact, made it all the way to the 0 and then some. And then the secondary spot was we ended up with these P2s, and we made lower lows. And they were congruent, but then you ended up with the orange dipping below red and beautiful spike, as well as green rising. And even if you waited, I mean, everything started to just turn up, and from a shakeout standpoint, so whether it was waiting for the yellow crossing above magenta on the shakeout, you already had green over red, and also the dip of orange, and in fact, in this case too, you had cyan below 0. And then it just was a matter of a couple of bars of back and forth before it just finally started to take away. But as it was doing so, it started with positive extremes, and that was right down at the 77. So that became interesting, and then by the end of the day, classic. In this particular case, a little cautious, not going with the earlier setup simply because of shakeout magenta over 15 on Rising Azure, Rising Gold right there. They had just rolled over and hit that first algo level, which I thought potentially could be bounce setup, but then when we put in the DOC spread, it was like, okay, that's clear, and that cascaded all the way into the post market and down below, and then it's just been in a bit of a recovery mode, but you got red riding most of this, but on the pivot here you can see magenta is led on that, so it's got the potential to break above that, but you can see fighting between the preset algo levels, which that's where we're going to need to see breakout moves where one side of the miscalculates and we get a strong push to one side. Right now they're just playing within the range that they've established. That's fine, we'll continue to do it. Still clean signaling, so we'll take it. As always though, I will update you on the Skype chat and keep posting relevant details. Trade well, talk to you later.